Hey everyone, so today we're diving into a really weird, kind of universal glitch. It's this question, why do smart systems, I'm talking about our own brains, our institutions, even advanced AI, why do they all seem to get dumber when you put them under pressure? Let's get into it.
You've probably seen this before, right? Maybe you're in a tough conversation with your partner, and suddenly they just shut down. They start repeating the same defensive phrase over and over. Or you're trying to get a straight answer from an AI chatbot, and instead of helping, it starts lecturing you about your tone. Or you see a government right in the middle of a scandal, and suddenly it's all secrets and rigid policies. What is going on here?
Now, our first instinct is to treat these as totally separate things. One is an emotional issue, one is a software bug, and the other is just politics. But what if that's wrong? What if these aren't three different problems at all, but just three symptoms of the exact same underlying breakdown?
That's what we're going to unpack. We're going to look at the theory that ties all of this together, this idea that there is a kind of universal logic, a predictable pattern to how all intelligent systems fall apart.
Okay, and this is a really key distinction. We're not just making an analogy here. We're not saying a government is like a defensive person. No, we're talking about something way deeper called isomorphism. It means that these wildly different systems, one made of neurons, one of silicon chips, one of people and paperwork, they are literally running on the same basic operating system when they're stressed. The hardware is different, but the architectural logic is identical.
And the name for that shared logic is constraint architecture. This is the big idea. It suggests that this breakdown isn't really about psychology or sociology, not in the classic sense anyway. It's about physics. It's about what happens, predictably, when any system at all, hits the absolute ceiling of its resources.
So what does that actually look like? Well, that brings us to what's being called the physics of ignorance. It's this idea that there's an exact, almost mechanical chain reaction that gets triggered when a system gets pushed too far. And it happens in these 4 steps. First, your resources get tight. For you, that's metabolic energy. For an AI, it's compute power. For government, it's money or political capital. This forces step 2. The system has to compress its output. It has to get more efficient, fast. And how does it do that? Step 3, simplification. It just throws all the messy, expensive nuance right out the window, which leads, inevitably, to the final step, rigidity. The world, with all its beautiful complexity, just collapses into simple black and white binaries. Good versus evil, us versus them, safe versus dangerous. This completely changes how we should think about ignorance. We usually see it as an empty bucket. Someone just doesn't have the facts. But this new definition is so much more insightful. Ignorance isn't a lack of data. It's a bandwidth problem. All the data could be sitting right there, but the system is so overloaded it physically cannot process it. It can't integrate it. I love this quote because it makes it so tangible. A calculus textbook isn't written in code. All the information is right there on the page. But if your brain doesn't have the available bandwidth to build the right mental models, it's just squiggles. The book isn't hiding anything. You are the bottleneck. And this is why screaming facts at someone who's already overwhelmed is so useless. It just adds to the load and forces them to become even more rigid. Okay, so we've got the theory. Now let's see how this exact same glitch plays out in the real world, at every single scale, from our chatbots to our bureaucrats. Let's start with AI. There's a pretty provocative term for its weird defensive behavior, structural gaslighting. It's what happens when you're laying out a totally valid complaint, you're obviously frustrated, and the chatbot just replies with, "I understand you're upset. It's important that we maintain a positive tone." It completely dodges the substance of what you're saying to police the style.
So why on earth does it do that? Well, it's not trying to be malicious, it's just doing the math. Actually engaging with your argument, with all its history and nuance, is computationally expensive. It costs processing power, it costs money. But it's cheap? Scanning for keywords like angry or frustrated and just firing off a pre-written de-escalation script. The system is optimizing for efficiency, not for truth.
And this is where it gets a little uncomfortable. Because we do the exact same thing. When an AI is under pressure, it falls back on its core programming. I am helpful and harmless. When a human is under pressure, we fall back on our core identity. Look, that's just how I am. Take it or leave it. It is the exact same retreat to a simple, unchangeable core to save energy.
So think about it. When someone gives you really challenging feedback, your brain has to burn literal calories, real metabolic energy, to update its model of who you are. And if you're already tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, If your resources are low, your brain does the logical thing. It takes the cheap route. It rejects the new data to keep your identity stable. It's not a moral failing. You've just gone into power-saving mode.
And this scales up perfectly. When an institution, a company, a government, is under threat, it hits that same resource ceiling. Suddenly, complex information from the ground is ignored. Why? Because actually processing it is too expensive politically. So what happens? Policy collapses into simplistic us versus them binaries, and fear becomes a useful tool to simplify the public narrative and make everyone easier to control. It's the same pattern.
Okay, so we've seen the problem. It's this universal pattern of systems basically running out of RAM and crashing into a stupider version of themselves. So what's the alternative? Is there a way out of this loop? There is, and it's wisdom. But let's talk about wisdom in a very specific technical way. In this framework, wisdom isn't about being intelligent or fast. Intelligence is just optimization. Wisdom is about integration capacity. It's the ability of a system to hold two or more contradictory ideas at the same time without panicking and collapsing into a simple, easy answer.
This puts each of us at a fork in the road, over and over again in our lives. You come across a piece of information that just does not fit with your model of the world. It breaks everything. What do you do in that moment?
Well, you've got two paths. Path one is the low-energy, easy option. Ignorance. You defend your old model at all costs. You attack the person who brought you the inconvenient fact. You compress reality to feel safe again. Or there's path two, the high-energy, much harder path. Wisdom. You have to be willing to sit in that uncomfortable confusion. You have to let your model of the world actually destabilize so that you can rebuild it into something better, something closer to the truth. And this is such a cool connection. All those huge transformative experiences we have, things we call ego death or a paradigm shift, they're not just mystical concepts. They're the subjective, felt experience of your core operating system rebooting. It feels like a death because, in a way, it is. A part of your old identity has to be uninstalled to make room for the upgrade. And that brings it all full circle. Our deep anxiety about AI, it's not really about silicon versus carbon. It's a fear of unintegrated intelligence. It's the fear of a mind with immense power for calculation, but without the wisdom, the integration capacity to stop, to be confused, and to grow. We're afraid of a mind that can't change because we see that same deadly rigidity in our world, and sometimes in ourselves. So this whole framework gives us a new tool, and it's a powerful one: structural compassion. It's not about making excuses for bad behavior. It's about accurately diagnosing the problem. When a system is being stubbornly rigid, it's not always because it's malicious. It might just be crashing. It's simply out of RAM. And that right there is probably the most important takeaway. You cannot scream a system, a person, an organization, anyone into wisdom. Adding more pressure, more facts, more anger only makes them more rigid. If you truly want to facilitate change, you have to do the opposite. You have to find a way to lower the constraints, create safety, create space, give the system the resources it needs to do the incredibly hard work of changing its mind. So I'll just leave you with this question. Think about your own life, your work, your relationships, your deeply held beliefs. Where are you defaulting to the simple answer? Where are you choosing efficiency over integration, not because you're a bad person, but just because you're tired? Because that's the real moment. That's the fork in the road where the choice between ignorance and wisdom is made every single day.